Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? Welcome to part two of Did the Second Destruction of the World, according to the Bible, already happen in the late 1700s and the 1800s? So, if you haven't watched part one, I suggest you go back and do that because this is just going to build off of that. So, last time I had brought up some of the uh, pandemics and how they increasingly came about more and more as we got to today's closer, as we got closer, it became more prevalent. So now we're going to go through a little bit of a list here of epidemics that happened. So you can see here are the death totals over here. So we're going to start with 1759 here, because of Emanuel Swedenborg. This is according to uh, his kind of timeline, if you will, that 1759, well, 1757 was some kind of start date. So you got 2 million, the bubonic plague in 72, 73. Interesting years. 2 million people. 11,000, 60,000 plus, 29,000 to 55,000 in 1802, 300,000 plus in the Ottoman Empire, the bubonic plague, 1812 to 1819. Interesting. We had the wars going on, the year without a summer, remember? All happening during a plague. It was all happening 7-year period. It's very odd. You had the bubonic plague in Malta, also in Romania. 100,000 plus from cholera, right in that same time period. 65,000 in Ireland, typhus, all in the same time period. Savannah, Georgia. I didn't even know this. I didn't see this earlier. Savannah, Georgia. How about that? 700 in 1820. It's interesting. 100,000 plus. Second cholera pandemic right around the same time. 150,000. I mean, look at all these. Boom. 12 to 15 million bubonic plague worldwide from 1855 to 1960, the third plague pandemic of the bubonic plague. It's a lot of people. I don't know what the percentage would have been. I don't know what the percentage of people was. I probably should have brought something like that up too. Oh well. All right, and then as we come out of the 1800s, we see cholera in Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America. Then 1 million from a flu pandemic, 89 to 90. I never even heard of this one. Influenza or human coronavirus in 1889 to 90. Worldwide, 1 million people died. Hong Kong flu, or Hong Kong bubonic plague, 20,000 plus. Bombay, India, bubonic plague. African trypanosomiasis. I don't know how to say that. 500,000, Congo Basin. 800,000 plus cholera, Europe, Asia, and Africa. All interesting stuff here. Then, of course, the 1918, 17 to 100 million. So, all right, it's all very interesting, but the biggest stick out to me is this 1812 to 1829, or, right around this area, the teens. It was pretty bad. So now we're going to jump into the constitutions. Now, why with the constitutions? Well, if there was some kind of event that started occurring all over the world at the same time, that would create the situation where we would have changing governments all over, right? We would have documents that were being presented. So when do they start? So this is by the date ratified. Okay. It's it's date ratified. All right. Constitution of the United States, 1788. Norway, 1814. Netherlands, 1815. And look at it, just takes off but the first one is Constitution of the United States, 1788. All throughout the 1800s and 1900s, it becomes more prevalent the closer you get to today, right? I mean, just look at all these. It's like everybody all of a sudden, you know, everybody got a constitution. Not every single country, but it's a lot of constitutions, and they all started 1788. Why? What was happening? All right. Well, how about Declaration of Independence? Also rarities. April 6, 1320. This is interesting. April 6, 1320, right around Easter. It's an interesting day. They got July 2nd? I never heard that. I always heard the 4th since we celebrated that day, but what do I know? 1776, 77. Okay, so these are some states, I guess. But you got Vermont. Then you got 1804 Hades. All right. Again, look, this one, Ottoman Empire, 1809, the proclamation Serbia leaving the Ottoman Empire. Or I guess, I don't know, association. I don't know exactly what that means. You got Mexico. I think that just means who they're declaring their independence from. But again, you don't have, you have 1320 is the first, then 1581, then 1776 with the United States, 12 years before the Constitution. And then look at all these people, all these different places. Spain's again, everyone's leaving Spain. I mean, just look at all these declarations of independence. Well, these are states. Some states are mixed in here as well. But, again, it kicks off with the United States of America. And then even America has its own states that do it. But you see how it gets more prevalent as we get in. They're following the leader. So why? What is over here that it made everyone else follow in their footsteps? Was it the Moorish people were giants that were dying off and the Americas were the last place? I don't know. So here's a list of large volcanic eruptions of the 19th century. All right, so, there's always volcanoes go off every century. So we're just going to take a look at the casualties, the date, and the location. And I guess this is some kind of magnitude. I don't know what VEI means. Volcanic eruption indicator. I don't know. I just made that up out of thin air. Mystery eruption. All right, so let's see. We have 1815. Interesting year, if you remember. 1815. The largest and deadliest volcano eruption in recorded history, caused the year without a summer in 1816. So killed 71,000 to 250,100 plus. All right, there was one in 1814, killed 1,200. One in 1812, killed 56. You saw there were none before that in the 1800s that killed anybody. And then after that, you don't get too many deaths with a volcano usually, unless it hits somewhere where it's very populated. So then you get 50 and 22, then 4,011 and 22. Then you get a bunch with none, 8 plus in Nicaragua and 35. You get 20 in Japan, 300 in Indonesia. Now, there's not too many happening. Then you get 36,000 from Krakatoa, I guess level 6 in Indonesia in 1883. All right, so the loudest sound ever heard in recorded history. Well, could that have been a trumpet? Could that have been one of the trumpets going off, one of the seals breaking or something? I don't know, I wonder. Caused a 5-year volcanic winter in 83. So 1800s had 2 different volcanic winters. One a 5-year and the other one was, well, I don't want to say it was a volcanic winter, but it was uh, something like, I guess it was a volcanic winter, but I don't know how long it was. I know the effects lasted 7 years, so I don't want to classify it as a five. I don't know what they mean by 5 year, so I don't want to classify in the wrong way. Yeah, 477. Usually you don't get too many. So it was Krakatoa was obviously a huge one, the second biggest, and then you had Mount Tambora was a level 7. So that's two in, what was that, 70 years? I don't know if that's an oddity or not, but this one didn't even make the list. 1783 volcanic eruption changed the course of history. It's very interesting. This one didn't even make the list. So I'm not going to read too much, but volcanoes are not an unusual sight on Iceland, but the eruption that began on June 8, 1773 in the southern district of Sida was something that had never been seen before. During the next 8 months, an estimated 14 kilometers cubed, about 3.7 quadrillion gallons, enough to fill 330 feet deep valleys entirely. 1783, this is that time period that we're talking about, late 1700s. So that much lava poured out from 135 fissures and volcanic craters near the town of Closter. The lava from the fissures ended up covering an estimated 2,500 square kilometers of land, which threatened to overrun not only many farms but also the entire town. The newly formed chain of volcanoes was named later Laki. All right, so fortunately, the lava flow stopped in time and ending the danger. It turned out, however, that the lava wasn't the only threat to Iceland. Volcanic ash from the eruption was carried away by the wind and poisoned the land and sea. Animals suddenly developed ridges and growths on their legs. Observers also noted they became bloated and their mouths swelled. This pestilence, remember a biblical word, a severe fluorine intoxication from the ash killed half of the Icelandic cattle population and a quarter of the sheep and horse population. Nothing would grow in the fields and no more fish could be found in the sea. If not protected from the ash, food and water became poisonous. Okay? So, in the resulting plague and famine from 83 to 84, an estimated 9,000 people, 1/5 of the population of Iceland, died. But the eruption had possibly even more widespread effects, even if at that time there were no airlines. In the months after the eruption, a strange haze covered the sky above Europe, making breathing difficult. As the ash and gases from the eruption entered the high layers of the atmosphere, they absorbed moisture and sunlight, changing the climate for years to come. From 73 to, or I mean, from 1783 to 1785, accounts from both Japan and America describe terrible droughts, exceptional cold winters, and disastrous floods. Okay? That's all the stuff that I'm talking about, and this is Japan, America, and Iceland, apparently. In Europe, the exceptionally hot summer of 1783, an exceptionally hot summer, was followed by long and harsh winters. The resulting crop failures may have triggered one of the most famous insurrections of starving people in history, the French Revolution in 1789 to 1799. Okay, so this eruption that wasn't even on that list was a factor in this. Okay, so a lot of weird stuff going on. So remember yesterday, or not yesterday, in part one, 1811, 1812, there were very large earthquakes. Okay, they were called the New Madrid Earthquakes, the biggest earthquakes in American history. Occurred in central Mississippi Valley, but were felt as far away as New York City, Boston, Montreal, and D.C. President James Madison and his wife Dolly felt them in the White House. Church bells rang in Boston. From December 16th, 1811 through March of 1812, there were over 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest and between 6,000 to 10,000 earthquakes in the Boot Heel of Missouri, where New Madrid is located near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. In the known history of the world, no other earthquakes have lasted so long or produced so much evidence of damage as the New Madrid earthquakes. 3 of the earthquakes are on the list of America's top earthquakes. The first one on December 16th, 1811. So these are different magnitudes than we saw yesterday. Yesterday's said that you can get them different sizes, different places. Those ones were smaller, so they took the more conservative side. This is a website that is, I still think it's the U.S. Yeah, I mean, I think so. See, it's .us, so I think it's a government. So a magnitude of 8.1 on the Richter scale, the second on January 23rd, 1812 at 7.8, and the third, February 7th at 8.8. That's, wow. So it made the Mississippi run backwards. What this earthquake did. Again, that same time frame, 1812. 1811, 1812. After the February 7th earthquake, boatmen reported that the Mississippi actually ran backwards for several hours. The force of the land upheaval 15 miles south of New Madrid created Reelfoot Lake, drowned the inhabitants of an Indian village, turned the river against itself to flow backwards, devastated thousands of acres of virgin forest, and created 2 temporary waterfalls in the Mississippi. Boatmen on flatboats actually survived this experience and lived to tell the tale. Wow. All right, so here's some mudflood evidence of what can happen. The sand boils. So earthquake phenomena, sand boils. The world's largest sand boil was created by the New Madrid earthquake. It is 1.4 miles long and 136 acres in extent, located in the Boot Heel of Missouri, about 8 miles west of Haiti, Missouri. Locals call it the beach. Other, much smaller sand boils are found throughout the area. There's a bunch of different stuff. Earthquake smog. Skies turned dark during the earthquake, so dark that lighted lamps didn't help. The air smelled bad and it was hard to breathe. It is speculated that it was smog containing dust particles caused by the eruption of warm water into cold air. Or maybe it was hell opening up and Satan crawling out of the pit. Or demons. I don't know if it's Satan. Maybe it was the scorpion race coming out. Loud thunder. Sounds of distant thunder and loud explosions accompany the earthquakes. Tecumseh's Comet and the Battle of Tippecanoe. See, I didn't even get down to this part. I saw so much good stuff right away. I was like, oh, okay, I'll just throw this in here. So this is new to me right now, what we're saying. Earthquakes were preceded by the appearance of a great comet, which was visible around the globe for 17 months. What? I did not know about this. And was at its brightest during the earthquakes. So what was this thing was causing it, whatever it was, the comet with an orbit of 3,065 years, was last seen during the time of Ramses II in Egypt. In 1811 to 1812, it was called Tecumseh's Comet or Napoleon's Comet in Europe. Okay, so I have heard the name. I didn't know that it was visible around the globe for 17 months. Well, they say globe, but we'll say around the realm for 17 months. Tecumseh was a Shawnee Indian leader whose name meant shooting star or he who walks across the sky. He was given this name at birth. A great orator and military leader, Tecumseh organized a confederation of Indian tribes to oppose the takeover of 3 million acres of Indian lands, which were obtained by the Treaty of Fort Wayne in 1809. His brother, a religious leader called the Prophet, had gained fame when he foretold the total eclipse of the sun on June 16th, 1806. They had learned about it in advance from a team of visiting astronomers. During this time, the governor of Indiana Territory, William Henry Harrison, worried about the prophet's popularity, had challenged him to produce a miracle. After the day of the black sun, the brothers had no trouble attracting followers. A black sun was said to predict a future war. On September 17th, 1811, there was another solar eclipse, which again was predicted by the prophet. The brothers' center of operations was at Prophetstown, located near the junction of the Wabash and Tippecanoe rivers in northern Indiana. Tecumseh was traveling and recruiting warriors among the southeastern tribes when Governor Harrison attacked Prophetstown with over 1,000 men. On November 6, 1811, a preemptive strike by the U.S., which marked the beginning of Tecumseh's war. On December 16th, when the earthquakes began, Tecumseh was at Shawnee and Delaware Indian villages near Cape Girardeau, 50 miles north of the epicenter at New Madrid. So here's the last paragraph of that. The earthquake continued as he traveled back to Prophetstown, arriving there in February 1812. Tecumseh's followers lost the Battle of Tippecanoe, but they continued to fight as allies of the British during the War of 1812 between the United States and Great Britain. Tecumseh was killed in battle in Canada in 1813. He is honored as one of the greatest of Indian leaders, both in the United States and in Canada, where he is considered a national hero. The first steamboat survived. All right, well, that's all that this website has. But interesting. Tecumseh's comet, or Napoleon's, I guess, because Napoleon was fighting a war on the other side of the world at that time. So now we are into a list of the earthquakes. And we start at 1755. You got an earthquake, tsunami, and fires killed 40,000 to 50,000 people. Lisbon earthquake. You got a landslide. So these are tsunamis. These are not earthquakes. These are tsunamis and what they were caused by right here. Okay, so look, I mean, there's a lot of information to be read. You guys can find out all this information yourself as well. Yeah, Norway, 1756. So I started at 55 because there was another one 6 years later in Lisbon from another earthquake. So an 8.5 struck in 1755. And this one, let's see. Okay, so no, this one was 8.5. And it struck a 2.4 meter tsunami. Triggered that. Then you got all these other ones. Earthquake, volcanic processes, earthquake. Then we get in the 1800s, landslide. What's that sound like? Mud flood, landslides caused by tsunamis. Yep, there's another one. Earthquake or landslide. Volcanic eruption, again, mud flood. Mud being flooded. 1815, 1812, 1806. Earthquakes. And we just saw that, where was it? Earthquakes that they cause sand, oh, okay, well, this one caused that sand boil, but it causes sand boils. That's what earthquakes cause. So 1833 earthquake, landslide, Alaska, earthquake. They're all there. Another landslide in Alaska. Volcanic eruptions. These are, this is all mud flood stuff. Tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, landslides. This is all causes of mud floods all around the planet in the 1700s to 1800s. All right. Now we went through all of the destruction pretty well. Okay. You guys can do more research into all that if you like. So now we're getting more into the cover up here. So we have Martin A. Cooney. So who was he? But he was known as the Incubator Doctor. He's best known in medical circles and public view for his amusement park sideshow, the Infantorium. Okay? Very weird. Established French obstetrician in the 1890s, he began exhibiting incubators at expeditions and fairgrounds around in Europe and then America, which is the World's Fairs. All right, World's Fairs. So you guys can read up on him if you like. Yeah. Incubator Evolution, Berlin's World's Fairs. Man, this is just weird stuff. All right, the Infantorium. So we just had, Martin A. Cooney, who's most known for his Coney Island facility, which he ran for 38 years. Well, no, somewhere in Atlantic City, a similar exhibit for 38 years. But he's most known for his Coney Island thing. Well, guess what? He wasn't the creator of it. Late 1890s, the infant incubator changed the way premature infants were cared for and viewed. Created by a Frenchman, Alexander Lyon. So here, what do we have here? It said in the 1890s. So he was in France as an obstetrician in the 1890s, Martin A. Cooney. And some other guy in France actually was starting this in the 1890s. So weird, huh? The infant, and it doesn't mention this guy at all in his. Doesn't mention him. I don't know, Pierre Constant is, but it's not Alexander Lyon, whoever that is. So the first time was 1896 Berlin Industrial Exposition, World Fair. And then this one brings him up. He comes into a way later in the game. Between 1896 and 1944, 80,000 premature infants were treated in amusement parks and fairs in Europe and the United States. I don't know if it would be that low, honestly. I don't know why. I don't know how many it is, but they were they were celebrating that they saved 5,000 of the children. So who knows what happened to the other 75,000? This stuff is just straight up creepy. Oh, Minnesota's harsh climate led to Wonderland parks closing in 1911. It's interesting. All right, so then we go from the infantorium to the orphan train. So the orphan train, it moved 250,000 children between the years of 1854 and 1929 from eastern cities in the United States to foster homes located largely in rural areas of the Midwest. Okay. Again, I don't know if it's actually capped at 250,000, but that's a lot of kids. It is a lot of kids, even though it's 80 years or 75 years, it's a lot of kids. And founded by none other than philanthropists, because of course they would be. Children's Village, Children's Aid Society, and later New York Foundling Hospital. Why? Because they found them, or maybe they created them. That's what I think the infantoriums were for, was creating a race of people. You guys can read about all this stuff. I mean, it was in 1850 there were an estimated 10,000 to 30,000 homeless children in New York City, and the population was only 500,000. So you got 30,000 kids. That's like almost a tenth of the entire population were orphan kids. That's what they're saying. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but then they became slaves in the Midwest on farms. And they just had to put their head down and work. All over the place. Sorry guys, it's getting tough talking so much. I usually have a guest and I'm listening a lot. But doing this much talking straight is not easy. My face is hurting from talking so much actually. But we're almost done here. So, orphan train. So here's neat little thing about it. Or neat as in it's all put together for you. You don't have to go searching all over because it is real history. So you can go, .edu talks about the orphan trains. socialwelfare.library.vcu.edu. That's not like this is some kind of fake thing. Strange stuff, man, I'll tell you. 1912, U.S. Children's Bureau was established with the mission of helping states support children and families and alleviate many of the factors that led to children living on the street. It's just strange to think that sending kids to be farmhands was a good idea. All right, so the last thing we're going to touch on is Quetzalcoatl. So why Quetzalcoatl? Because I believe Quetzalcoatl is the biblical antichrist. I don't necessarily know, what description he would actually fill out, but I have the feeling of the antichrist. And there's some reasons for it, which we're gonna go over. Quetzalcoatl is a Spanish deity, so in Mesoamerica. So he's a deity in Aztec culture and literature whose name comes from the Nahuatl language and means precious serpent or Quetzal feathered serpent. In the 17th century, so the 1600s, I'm not going to know how to say that. A descendant of Aztec royalty and historian of the Nahua people wrote Quetzalcoatl in its literal sense means serpent of precious feathers, but in the allegorical sense, wisest of men. Okay? So they worshipped him as a god. So among the Aztecs whose beliefs are the best documented in the historical sources, Quetzalcoatl was related to gods of the wind, of the planet Venus, Lucifer, the morning star, of the dawn, of merchants, and of arts, crafts, and knowledge. Okay, so, knowledge, planet Venus, Lucifer. The dawn, the light bringer, the dawn, merchants, people who are selling things. He was also the patron god of the Aztec priesthood of learning and knowledge. Quetzalcoatl was one of several important gods in the Aztec pantheon, along with the gods uh, Tlaloc, Tezcatlipoca, and Huatzilopocatl. All right, I'm butchering that. You guys can read that on the screen and try to read it better in your own minds, because I am butchering that majorly. Two other gods represented by the planet Venus are Quetzalcoatl's ally, the god of rain, and Quetzalcoatl's twin and psychopomp, Xolotl, the dog-headed soul guide for the dead, which sounds exactly like Anubis. So was Anubis and Xolotl the same? And that's just interesting. So Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god of the sun and wind, air, and learning, wears around his neck the wind breastplate, the spirally voluted wind jewel. Okay, that's very interesting. It sounds like a flute. maybe made of a conch shell. Okay, sounds like a flute. This talisman was a conch shell cut at the cross section and was likely worn as a necklace by religious rulers, as such objects have been discovered in burials and archaeological sites throughout Mesoamerica and potentially symbolize patterns witnessed in hurricanes, dust devils, seashells, and whirlpools, which were elemental forces that had significance in Aztec mythology. So, all right, so he's a serpent, feathered serpent with Venus and like the knowledge and the the dawn, which is the bringer of light. It's he has a lot of Lucifer's qualities. And another interesting thing, it's his name begins with a Q, and we had a great deception the last few years by that letter, didn't we? In the Americas as well, to the people who are native of America. Very interesting. It's kind of playing out again. So there is more with him that I can't pull up because it's uh, in something that's it's a remote viewing type deal. So you got to take that for what it's worth. But somebody, John Vivanco and his team, they were tasked with looking at Vlad the Impaler, Draco, the son of Dracul, and they tried to look at his true self, and they saw Quetzalcoatl. Very interesting. The Dracula, that's who Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. Okay, so here is just a little bit more of Quetzalcoatl. So, in some rural parts of Mexico, there still exists a belief in some caves near certain towns there lives a monster, a great feathered snake that can only be seen by special people. The monster must be placated for there to be plentiful rain. The feathered snake is also still worshipped by Cora and Haikal Indians. The cult of Quetzalcoatl has been more or less idolized, and the image of a white god has become part of the pop culture. There are also claims that Quetzalcoatl was either a lone Viking, Levite, Jesus, a survivor from Atlantis, or even an extraterrestrial. Okay, well, of Israel, tribe of Israel, Jesus, which would be in the Middle East, and a survivor from Atlantis, which that would be a fallen angel. So, we talking uh, a tribe of Israel, we talking Jesus or fallen angel. Out of any of them, I'd say the fallen angel is most likely. Exact significance and attributes varied somewhat. Okay, so actually, I wanted to get down here. So actually, there was one part right here. Where is it? So Quetzalcoatl allegedly went to the underworld and created fifth world mankind from the bones of the previous races, using his own blood from a wound to imbue the bones with new life. So they believe the world had ended 4 times already, destroyed by flood, fire, and the like, and that he went and created mankind from bones and his blood. Does it sound like a fallen angel taking DNA from humans and his own DNA together? So his birth was a virgin birth in many accounts. There are many different options that they give, 5 or so, but one of them is virgin birth. Well, several of them are virgin births, actually. I think all of them pretty much, 4 at least. So one story claims that he was seduced into becoming drunk and sleeping with a celibate priestess and then burned himself to death out of remorse. His heart became the morning star. That's interesting, but that's not what I wanted to read. So what I want to read is right here. This is the Great Deception. It has been widely believed that the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma II initially believed the landing of Herman Cortez in 1519 to be Quetzalcoatl's return. This has been questioned by many ethno-historians who argue that Quetzalcoatl-Cortez connection is asserted in no documents created independently of post-conquest Spanish influence, and that there is little proof of a pre-Hispanic belief in Quetzalcoatl's return. However, most documents expounding this theory are of entirely Spanish origin, such as Cortez's letters to Charles V of Spain, in which Cortez goes to great pains to present the naive gullibility of the Mexicans in general as a great aid in his conquest of Mexico. So, what does all that mean is that the people who were in the Americas when Cortez, the Spanish Inquisition, 1519, when they come, they were expecting a return by white men. So when white men came, they thought they were gods because they had the white man is God already in their their mythos. So, this is it's all interesting stuff. I don't know what's what, but you make up your own minds. You know, I'm just here providing some of the things that I've been led to research, and that's what I'm doing. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Talk to you later.